John Ziegler, he's a senior columnist with Mediaite, sharp dude, and he is all over a story that I have found to be completely fascinating. And as I welcome in John, I just want to make sure everyone understands the Penn State Jerry Sandusky thing is something everyone remembers, at least vaguely. And what do you know about it? You know what you were told. And what were you told? Penn State had a football coach who was apparently abusing young boys at an alarming rate on the campus of Penn State, and there was a huge cover-up, and now he's in prison, and everyone knows these things to be true. John Ziegler, welcome. Are they true?
Jesse, they're not true. And the most amazing part of this whole story, which we're coming up on the 10th anniversary of in just a week and a half from November of 2011, is that it's not even close. And I'm glad you started this conversation with trust in the media, because if people understood even the tip of the iceberg of this remarkable real story of what did not happen involving the so-called Penn State scandal, those numbers would be at zero. They would be literally zero trust, because this was a story that the news media told us in 2 or 3 days back in November of 2011, trust us. We're going to tell you a nonsensical story, a story that makes absolutely no sense whatsoever, destroying the lives of 5 incredibly respected men at Penn State, including the great Joe Paterno, in just a couple of days with no actual evidence. Just trust us. We're gonna know exactly where this story is going to go, even though we don't know anything. We know none of the facts. We know none of the names of the accusers. All we know is this horrendous allegation, and then in the middle of a panic, and we've seen over the last year and a half plus what happens in a panic, Jesse, especially when the media has an agenda and a narrative that they like. We come to all sorts of conclusions that make no sense, and then once we have come to those conclusions, look out, because the news media and so-called experts and whatever realm it is never, ever, ever want to admit that they are wrong, and they see all the facts that come in through the prism of their original narrative. I have no connection to Penn State. I went to Georgetown. I live in Southern California, where in 2011 I was a documentary filmmaker. And this story never made any sense to me, but I bought most of it. I bought the part about Sandusky abusing young boys. I said, okay, that's plausible, I guess. The cover-up story makes no sense. The Paterno angle is absurd. But I'm going to investigate this, because I know this is a type of story from my own experiences that the news media is very vulnerable to blowing. And what I found, Jesse, is that not only did they blow this, they blew this in catastrophic fashion, and it's not even close. And we did a podcast, which I know you're aware of, called With the Benefit of Hindsight, which will soon have 20 different episodes, including enormous numbers of exclusive interviews with people very close to this case. And when you realize the true fact and fiction of what did and did not happen here, the most amazing part of it is it's not even close. Everyone at Penn State was innocent. The media blew this story. And I have explained it all in incredible detail, telling a story that no one else on the other side is able to refute or tell a story on their own. That's the most amazing part of this. No one on the side of the conventional wisdom of this story has ever been able to tell a narrative that makes a damn bit of sense. They just tell us this comical fairy tale that you just described at the top of the segment, and then they just say, oh, well, we all know this is what happened. Let's move on. I didn't move on. I did the math. The math on this story never added up. I've made it add up, and it's an absolute catastrophe from so many different aspects.
Okay, and again, I want to make sure everybody goes and listens to the podcast, because we don't have time for you to give all the details here. You do in the podcast. With the Benefit of Hindsight is the name of the podcast. So let me just ask a couple basic questions of it, John. Why? Like when we talk about COVID and media panic and stuff like that, it's not hard to figure out why Democrats and the media loved coronavirus. It destroyed an economy that was going to get Donald Trump elected. It gave power to every scumbag in this country and money in their pocket. It's not hard to figure out why they would push COVID panic. Why would anybody make an accusation like that? Which is, I don't think you can accuse somebody of doing anything worse than that. Why? Where'd it come from?
I'm an ardent anti-conspiracy person. In fact, the only people who are pro-conspiracy in this story are the ones that believe that there was a massive cover-up involving Joe Paterno and three very well-respected administrators at Penn State. There was no massive conspiracy here. This was a perfect storm of factors that caused everyone to act in their own self-interest. And the most dramatic self-interest here was with regard to the accusers. These are accusers, let's be clear, every single person who testified at Jerry Sandusky's trial made millions of dollars from their almost entirely anonymous, thanks to the news media protecting them, anonymous testimony. And that is an enormous incentive. In fact, one of the accusers, one of the least credible accusers at Jerry Sandusky's trial, number 9, got paid based upon documents leaked to me and another reporter from the Penn State settlements, got $20 million. $20 million. That's a hell of an incentive to tell a story that you're going to get away with without anyone even knowing your name. And this was one of many very perverse incentives. But I think maybe the most important perverse incentive was that of Penn State. Because Penn State, once they panic in the middle of this media firestorm and they fire Graham Spanier, the president of the university, and the great Joe Paterno, they are effectively taking responsibility. They are pleading guilty to things that did not happen, that they have no evidence happened. And once that happens, Penn State has an incredible self-interest, the people that run Penn State, to use other people's money to take responsibility for things that did not happen so that they will look good in the New York Times and the news media. And most importantly, they will justify the firing of Joe Paterno and Graham Spanier. Because if it turns out that this is all a fraud, and this is all a massive mistake, this is a Theranos, this is a Jussie Smollett situation, then they're the biggest morons that have ever lived in the history of the planet. So now they are invested. They are deeply invested. They're like people who said we should all be wearing masks. They are invested in that being true and real and the right decision. And once that happens, the media just says, well, my gosh, Penn State would be fighting this if it didn't happen. No, the people that were in charge had a self-interest in this being true. And there are many people at Penn State, and we've interviewed several of them, former Penn State Board of Trustees members, who know this is not true. They've seen all the documents. They publicly said, yes, even Jerry Sandusky is innocent here, and it's not close. But of course, the news media, being as deeply invested as anyone in this narrative, is not interested in alternative facts on this because they already have their fairy tale. This was an incredible Greek tragedy. This was tremendous for their ratings. It sold newspapers and created TV ratings, especially for ESPN, for years. And there's no way they're ever going to admit they were wrong unless absolutely forced to. And it's almost impossible in a case like this for that to happen.